Hey there, this is the your holistic health practitioner, and this is the YouTube live. We're doing a live event right now. We're going to do a Q&A. I'm having some problems getting the Q&A, so I'm going to just go on with some of these questions that I have right now. We're going to have some questions on some of the videos that I've done before. One of the questions that we have is about the root canals. Root canals being. Give me a second here. I'm trying to figure this out. Let me see if we go to show live chat messages. Okay. It's my first time doing it, so I'm trying to figure out show live chat. And I'm not seeing the chats. I'm not seeing where that goes to. So let's go chat view. Show. Having some problems here. I'll get it figured out. No. I'm not sure I want to cancel the streaming. So I don't see the comments here, and I don't know how. Let me check out one thing. So just give me a second here if you don't mind. Let's go to Creator Studio. Look at here. View channel. Videos. There we go. There's live now. There we go. There's live now. And there I do see some chats. There we go. There's live now. We'll turn the volume off of that. Okay, so we got one watching right now. I'm kind of double dutying this. So one is I'm talking to you through my phone, and I'm looking at the computer. So I'm gonna kind of go back and forth. So it's gonna be a little weird, but we'll get it figured out. This is a new thing. So I've had some people ask questions about the root canals. I'm going to talk a little bit about that one. So there, in the healthcare community or the alternative community, there's been a lot of problems in terms of, root canals are bad. Root canals are evil. In fact, Dr. McCullough is really against root canals, and I don't fault him for that. I think he's entitled to his opinion, and but in my opinion, I think if you do root canals correctly, it's always better to save your own tooth. It's always better to save a tooth rather than having it extracted and then turned into an implant. Because an implant, now let me say this, eventually, and it's pretty soon, this is all going to be obsolete. And the reason is because what's going to make this obsolete is stem cell therapy, stem cell implants. In fact, Dr. Lou Shoha, who is the guy that I talked to, hold on one second, I'll show you. This is the guy here, Dr. Lou Shoha. And again, he's in Southfield. Let me give you his number. It is in Southfield, it's 248-358-2910. And what Dr. Shoha has been doing is he's actually been doing stem cell implants and growing teeth back in children. This started in France and over in Germany. And in fact, over in France and Germany, they're doing it right now in adults. And what that means is eventually we'll get to a point where a bad tooth, or you knock a tooth out, or a tooth gets infected and you have to have it taken out, rather than going and having an implant put in, what they do is they'll take some cells out of your body, they take it in the back room, they spin it, and they take out the stem cells, and they turn it into kind of like a little nugget, and then they implant it like you would do like an implant, and then they use a laser to stimulate the growth, and what will happen is the root will grow and you'll have a new tooth grow in. That's going to be the ultimate, because implants, they don't fit the same way. They don't fit into your skull the same way. It's good to have your teeth, but the implants are not even the ideal. Now, if you have to do an implant, the zirconium implant, and the reason is that most standard implants, what you see are a titanium. And a titanium, they do a titanium post, which is you're sticking a metal post into the bone, and then the bone grows around it and it becomes solid. The problem with that is that it's metal. And titanium is, even though it is an inert material, a lot of implants are made, so whether you have a hip replacement or things like that, it's not ideal. And the reason is it's metal. Metal, even though titanium is not magnetic, it still acts as if it's like an antenna. And you have an antenna inside your bone, and it radiates inside your bone, which will weaken not only the bone structure, but it also sends signals up into your brain. That's debated. You have a lot of dentists who say that's a bunch of hooey, but no, it's not. Then the other thing that is not hooey is titanium can have a lot of problems with what's called biocompatibility, or osteointegration, meaning your bone is supposed to grow onto it, and it's supposed to kind of surround around it and then kind of become normal and be happy there. Well, osteointegration with the titanium is not always the best, meaning you can get a rejection and you can get sick, or it can become infected. Another thing that is really common is biofilms, or MRSA, which is you can have microscopic MRSA infection that is on the titanium. And if your immune system is not as strong as it should be, now you got a MRSA infection. And a MRSA infection can start to eat into the bone. It can start to eat into your face. And it can be, now you lose the jaw. Now you lose now these are really extremes, but they're possible. So what's better is actually having the zirconium. It's a ceramic, and it's impregnated with nano zirconium, and also has nano zeolite in it, which means it has a natural anti-infectiveness. And it also resonates the same as your bone. So you got the metal in here, and it resonates, and your bone is resonating too. And now you got this thing that's not resonating the same as your bone, and it will start to create weakness in that bone structure. The zirconium, even though it has a larger footprint and you have to have drill a bigger hole, so it's not as easy to put in as the titanium posts. Requires more skill. It oftentimes requires some bone grafting, because you need to regrow bone back in there, so it can take a little bit longer. But what it does is it resonates with the bone. It actually dances with the bone. It moves at the same vibration as the bone does, because it's designed to be almost ideally it's called cellular resonant. It resonates with the bone. Also, it has the same shock capability. Here's the other problems with metals, is metals have different expansions and contraction rates with hot and cold. So cold makes things shrink, and heat makes things expand. That's one of the problems with the old metal amalgams, is not only do they have mercury in them, but what happens is you drink something cold, they shrink. And then you drink something hot, they expand. And if it's sitting inside your tooth, let's say you drilled the cavity out, and now we filled it up with metal. Well, inside, this metal is going to expand and contract differently than the tooth structure. And what happens is it expands and contracts faster than the tooth structure can, and it creates little micro cracks. And then what happens is we can get bacteria that gets up underneath the metal amalgam, and it can happen within a week. It can happen within days after having this put. And so you can have people with metal amalgams that they've had them, these metal fillings that they've had for years, decades, that have been leaking and have gotten bacteria up underneath that starts to work its way towards the root and then can start to kill the root. And now you can have an infection that you don't even know about. So same thing can happen with the titanium post. The titanium post, it reacts differently. Whereas the zirconium and the ceramic, so let's say talking about like a ceramic, the zirconium crowns. So the crowns, not only when they put them on, they molecularly bond them to the tooth. So they actually adhere to the tooth structure. The glues that they use, what they do, this micro etching, which is it creates little kind of hairline, kind of stalactites almost. And then what happens is then it's like a joint. So it's like a dovetail joint. And then what they use a laser to then harden it up, and it becomes fused. So it's welding it to the tooth. So these newer materials are much, much better. And so that's why I do recommend that if you are going to have an implant, have a root canal. The root canal material is also using the same materials, that it fills up the tooth and then it adheres to the root structure. It adheres inside, it expands, and some of it expands into these little microtubules, which are just microscopic. Whereas the old root canal material, it just sits there like a block. It fills the root up, the canal up, but you have this constant possibility of having infection with inside the tooth structure that then still gets inside the bone. And so that's where you have a root canal that fails. And then now you have to have it extracted, but then now you've got infection that's gone into the bone and all kinds of other things. So I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to move on to the next one. And let's go to the next one. Okay, so this one about detached retinas. So I did the video on the eyes. And they've had a lot of people go, I've got a detached retina. What do I do about the detached retina? Can that help? So let me remind you. So it's this story about your eyes. Okay, so your eyes are these eyeballs that fit inside the socket, and your eyes have to get blood into it to deliver oxygen and nutrients and also carry waste products out of it. Your eyeball is actually a ball. It's a liquid-filled ball. And the way that we see, that you focus is, so you see the little iris, which is that little pinhole, and it opens and closes depending upon light. Well, those are muscles that control that. Now, that's not focusing. That's just how much light comes into the eye. So if it's really bright, it closes up into a pinhole so you don't burn out the back of your eye. But what the eye does is it actually focuses, because it's a ball, that it's the same thing as a camera, which is if you want to see something far away, you make the lens longer. And if you want to see something close up, you make the lens shorter. So this is what happens to the eyeball, is the eyeball is in the shape of a ball. And we have these muscles that hold on to it, that squeeze it. Not only it causes you to move your eyes around, those are all the muscles that do it, but it also controls the shape of the ball. And for you to see something long distance, what it does is it squeezes the eye and it makes it more of like an egg shape, which creates a longer distance. And then when you want to see something up close, it squeezes it and it flattens it out and makes it like a sideways egg shape, ever so slightly, but it's enough. So that's what changes your focal point. Well, the thing is that the reason that people need glasses is because one of two things, or both things, which is the muscles are weak and it can't squeeze the ball, so it can't make the change of the shape of the eyeball, or the eyeball is too hard and it can't move, it can't change shape, and so these muscles, they're not strong enough to change the shape. So you got two things that you want to do in terms of what eye health is strengthen those muscles, but also make the eyeball more malleable, more malleable. And so when the eyeball gets too not malleable, meaning not able to change shape, too rigid, the outside of the eyeball is kind of like it's like a crystalline matrix. It literally is like a crystal. It's like a flesh crystal. And that's kind of like a hard material. And then inside you've got the fluid that's inside, which is called the vitreous. And by the way, when you have floaters, what floaters are, so when people say, I have floaters, it kind of looks like I see worms, or it's like I move my eye and I see all these floaters in there. What those floaters are is parts of the retina that's breaking away. And instead of it nice being like a clear fluid, just like glass of water, what happened if you backwash into your water? You're going to have all these floaters in there. That's what it is you're breaking away of the retina. The inside surface is breaking away, having little particles that are breaking away. We'll get into that in a little bit, but let's go back to changing the shape of the ball. So over time, what can happen is this ball can become rigid because it's not getting enough nutrition. It's not getting the right type of nutrition, and we need very, very specific things for the eye. Some of the most important things, as we've discovered, is what's called lutein, zeaxanthin, astaxanthin. These are things that come from our foods, but problem is these foods are gone. We pretty much don't have these foods in our diet anymore. So that's why supplementation is very, very important. But the problem is that the supplements sometimes can't even get into the eye because it's kind of stuck and it's hard. So that's when I talked about doing the spoon and hot compress method, because whether it's your flesh or it's a steel girder or it's concrete, it doesn't matter. All materials of which your body is made out of, these materials respond to thermodynamics the same, which is cold makes things shrink and heat makes things expand. And so if you got a hard ball that's rigid and it really needs to move, so it's kind of like, spraying some WD-40 on it and then moving it until you break it free. What the cold does is taking these spoons and you put them in the freezer, and then you take the spoons and you take the backs of the spoons and you put them on your eyes. Super cold because it's metal, and metal is very good thermal conductor. So these spoons, you put them on the backs of your eyes and you let them sit there for about 20 seconds. And as you have the spoons not on your open eyes, close your eyes, it's on your eyelids, you look around so that you spread that cold all over as much surface as possible. Then take those spoons and stick them back in the freezer, and then take a hot compress. You do this in the kitchen because you want to have it available. So standing by the sink, standing by the freezer, cold spoons, put them back in the freezer, hot compress, and then do the same thing where you're moving your eyes around. And you go back and forth and back and forth. And what that does is, just through thermal properties, is it makes the tissue contract and expand and contract and expand. And that alone is what brings more fluid in. It's kind of like, in your kitchen, if you've ever burnt something and that there's a bunch of smoke in the kitchen, what you do is you stand at the doorway and you open and close the door and you're fanning. You're literally fanning the air. You're getting the more circulation. Same thing with the eyes, which is the cold causes it to squeeze and contract, which squeezes some of the fluid out the back, because there's a hole in the back of your eye. That's everything has to get through the eye, through the back of your eye. It's kind of looks like your eye very much looks like a baby, attached to the umbilical cord. Your eye looks exactly the same way. The back of the eye is the umbilical cord, which is all the food and nutrients and waste products has to go through that umbilical cord. A lot of times it gets stuck and it gets shut And what this does is it helps to just kind of squeeze stuff out and bring stuff in. So it's like a dirty sponge. You're squeezing it and sucking in, and squeezing it and sucking in. And that alone will start to clean the eyes out as well as soften the eyes up, making the actual eyeball more malleable. So that alone will help with your eyes in terms of you'll watch prescriptions go down and all kinds of the other things, because the reason that you need a prescription is that the ball is not moving or the muscles are weak. And usually the muscles are weak because the ball has just become so hard and that the muscles just kind of give up and they're just not strong enough. They're pretty weak muscles. So we can build muscle strength, but we can also change the shape of the eyeball. Okay, so that's the one that I wanted to. Oh, and then talking about detached retina. Where is it? This one. SOD, and it's backwards. I don't know if it's turns it around and makes it. Should say SOD, which stands for superoxide dismutase. Superoxide dismutase is it's a phytonutrient. It comes from plants, and usually we don't get enough of it. And if you have a detached retina or these floaters, taking SOD is a nutrient that actually helps to get the retina to actually go back. So it's kind of like the retina, it's kind of like wallpaper on the inside of your eyeball. It's a layer of film. And, wallpaper can start to peel away because the glue starts to break down and it starts to peel away. So what you want to do is you want to replace that glue, and then it will start to stick back. Because, see, keep in mind, it's a liquid-filled ball, and that liquid actually should push back against that. So what happens is the detached retina, as it starts to peel away, and part of it, too, is the detached retina can also come from dehydration of the eyeball, meaning the ball is supposed to be plumped up, filled with fluid like a grape, right? A nice, good, thick, crunchy grape. You bite into it, it goes crunch. Well, you let the grape sit out out on the table for a week or so, you'll start to see it starts to turn into a raisin, right? Because it's losing fluid, it's dehydrating. So part of that detached retina can also come from the dehydration of not only people being dehydrated, don't drink enough water, and don't drink enough water with salt. Here's one of the other secrets is dehydration comes from not having enough salt. A lot of people have learned, you got too much salt, that's bad for cardiovascular health. Well, it goes both ways. Too much salt can lead to dehydration and cause you to pee everything out, okay? But also not enough salt can cause, you got to have the right levels for the osmotic level, which is the cell, all of your cells look like little water balloons that are floating in water. Well, and it has a membrane, which is it's just a screen that allows things to get in and out. And what's called the osmotic relationship is that there has to be a relationship between the water it's floating and the water that's inside the cell. Well, salt creates this permeability, and it creates, when your salt levels are correct, you have a balance between the water that's outside, the interstitial fluid, the water that's outside of the cell, and the water that's inside of the cell. Not enough salt, the cell can dehydrate it. And even if you drink a lot of water, a lot of people say, I heard about that 8 glasses of water, and I really started drinking water, and then I peed my brains out. I couldn't stop peeing. So I gave that up, and I stopped. Well, problem is that if you don't have enough salt, the water just passes the membrane, just like a dry sponge. If that sponge is too dry and you stick it under the water just goes past it. You got to let it soak for a little bit. Then it starts to soak up the water. Then now you got a wet sponge. You soak up the water, you squeeze it out, and you stick it under the faucet, and then very immediately it sucks the water in. So it's got to get wet first. Well, that's what the salt does. The salt allows for you having this balance between what's outside of the cell and what's inside the cell. So that's one of the misnomers about dehydration is Isn't salt going to make me dehydrated? No. Mm-mm. Having the right amount of salt is going to keep you hydrated. And what's the right amount of salt? Especially in the summertime when people are sweating. And if you are sweating, keep in mind, you're sweating your salt out and you're drinking extra water. That's why every year there are top athletes, top marathon runners. People have been doing it for decades who are experts at it, who either collapse or drop dead from a heart attack. Why? It's because they keep passing, they keep drinking water. And so really good athletes take a salt pill or will drink an electrolyte, because if you dilute your salt levels, then it being an electrolyte, you can't run the electricity of your heart, because your heart is an electrical organ. It has to have an electrical signal. No, that's not true, Jason. Yeah, it is, because if you have a cardiac arrest, how do they get you back? They come with the paddles and they ka-chunk. They put electricity into, because the electrical signals are supposed to be thumping, right? It's electricity. Well, with not enough salt, the electricity doesn't work correctly, and people's hearts either flutter or they give up. So salt is so important. You have to have the right amount of salt. What's the right amount of salt is, if you're an average adult, it's somewhere around, if you're not athletic and if you're a couch potato, it's probably somewhere around a half teaspoon of sea salt. Half teaspoon of pink salt. This is the pink salt. And pink salt's not Himalayan salt. Pink salt is actually a freshly harvested sea salt that actually has Hawaiian minerals, Hawaiian clay, which is super minerals. That's what makes it pink. What makes Himalayan pink salt is that it's an ancient seabed. And it has that pink color, but it's ancient, meaning God knows how many thousands of years old it is. And what happens is salt sits around, it loses its piezoelectricity. It actually loses because it takes the sunshine in, and it makes it so that it's what's called piezoelectric. It's magnetic, it's electromagnetic, and it's happy. And sea salt, that is fresh sea salt, is piezoelectric, meaning it has a happy energy to it. It also is happy on its mineralization. It doesn't need any other minerals, and so it doesn't soak up any other minerals. Old salts, so old seabeds, lose some of its mineralization. It loses some of its mineral balance. And so what it does is it actually starts to steal minerals from other places. And one of the real secrets that of a lot of Himalayan salt is actually harmful, because these are huge chunks of salt that come from it, like I said, an ancient sea. They're like mountains of salt. And what they do is they have to break them up, and then they have to grind them. And what they do is they grind them with metal grinders. A lot of times it's nickel. And what happens is some of this sloughs off into the salt, as well as this salt, Himalayan salt, it's very hungry for the minerals that it's been missing, and it will suck these heavy metals, cadmium, beryllium, nickel. These things go into the salt, which then goes into your body. It's very harmful. It's been aluminum related to Alzheimer's. A lot of these metals which get ground up into the salt. So that's why a freshly harvested sea salt, it's not ground. It doesn't have, so like the traditional French sea salt, like a really good hand harvested Mediterranean sea salt, they use wood. So what they do is they pump in, or they go out into the deep sea and they pump up the seawater, and then they bring it into these pools that are on the shoreline. And what they do is they use wooden rakes, and they rake it into piles, and then it evaporates, and they make it into these like piles of pyramids that gets dried out by the sunshine. So it's very happy. It's got all of this great solar activity, and but it's never touched any metal, which is super important because it's not then depositing that metal into your body. So you want a good Mediterranean sea salt. Alessi is a good company. Premier Research Lab, they make Their sea salt is the Alessi salt, plus they use this Hawaiian Alea clay, that's what makes the pink part of it. So it's super extra minerals, which means it already has all the minerals. It has no need for any other minerals. It's very happy. So it doesn't steal anything from anything that it touches around you, but it also doesn't steal anything from your body. Okay, so let's go back to what's good salt. How much is salt is good? If you are a couch potato, it's about a half teaspoon of a good sea salt a day, not table salt. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about salt. What is table salt? Table salt is these salt mines. So again, it's these buried. Detroit is, miles and miles of underground salt mines. These are old ancient seabeds, which again, we talked about what's the problem with ancient seabeds. Okay. Now, to make iodized table salt, what they do, because see, I don't know if you ever went to the Caribbean before. They put rice inside their salt shakers because salt soaks up moisture and then it clumps together. And so you go to shake and nothing happens. It's just a big clump. So they put rice in there because that absorbs the moisture. Well, what Morton's and these other companies, they do is they grind up this ancient seabed salt. But then what they do is they heat the salt up to 2,500 degrees. They melt it into a liquid, which creates this very unstable. It actually is, it's changing the energetic signature of that salt, and that salt becomes extremely unstable. So when you eat it, when it goes into your body, it actually robs the minerals of your bones and because it wants to be happy. It's unsatisfied. So ancient seabed salt is unsatisfied, as well as when they heat it up to 2,500 degrees and then add these anti-caking agents and all this other stuff. So table salt has double the sodium level. So what they scared us all about is not actually salt, it's sodium. So sea salt has half the sodium levels of table salt. And then table salt is also, again, as I said, really harmful because it's had some really bad stuff done to it. It's become very unstable energetically, and it robs things from our body. So again, what salt are we talking about? We're talking about a good hand-harvested Mediterranean sea salt, or the pink salt, not the Himalayan salt. If you're going to buy salt, you're looking for what's called solar-dried or air-dried sea salt. That's the right type of salt. So if you're a couch potato, average, anywhere, an adult or even a teenager, anywhere from 80 pounds to 200 pounds. And you're a couch potato, not sweating, not exercising, probably anywhere from a half teaspoon to 3/4 of a teaspoon of sea salt per day. That's how much we need. Now, if you're athletic and you are sweating 5 times a week, that can jump up to a full teaspoon and a half to 2 teaspoons of sea salt per day. So what I recommend people do is you get your sea salt, and you take a little plastic, one of those Ziploc baggies, and you measure out what's right for you. So like I said, if you're a couch potato, measure out a half teaspoon, put it in the little baggie, put it in your pocket, put it in your purse. Some goes in your water, some goes in your food until it's gone at the end of the day. And if you get to the end of the day and you haven't touched it and you still got a half teaspoon, put it in a big glass of water and drink it down. Let's say I've got a 1/4 teaspoon left, put a 1/4 teaspoon in 8 ounces of water and drink it down. It's a little salty, it's not bad, but at least you're getting your salt levels. Your salt levels being correct is going to affect your adrenals. Your adrenals need salt. Your stomach needs salt for you to make hydrochloric acid to digest your food. It's made out of salt. How does it make it out of salt? Your body actually will take sodium chloride, which is in salt, takes the chloride fraction out of it, and then it takes a hydrogen out of water. See, your body is a nuclear fusion generator. It's amazing. It takes a hydrogen molecule or hydrogen atom, and it applies it and attaches it ionically through an ionic bond to the chloride fraction. Some it's taken from the chloride, came from the salt, the hydrogen came from water. Now it's bound together, and now you got HCl that's what your stomach secretes to break your foods down. Okay, so we need salt to make HCl for your food. Okay, so again, hope that answers the question about how much salt do we need. Who needs salt? Another little tidbit about salt: if you got kids who get pinworms, I had pinworms. I remember, God, it was horrible. I remember my parents were having a party, and they sent me to bed, and my butt was so itchy. I was a little kid. I was maybe like 5 years old, and I was crying, and I was like, ah. And I remember that it was when my neighbors came up, and what's wrong? What's wrong, Jason? My butt is so itchy, and it was, it's a little embarrassing, but and they soaked me in the tub, and they sent me to the doctor and everything. And okay, how do kids get pinworms? They're digging in the dirt, and they're biting their fingernails, and you're getting pinworms. Well, but how do they? Not all kids get pinworms. The kids that do not have enough salt. Okay, so if you're salt deficient, what happens is you don't build enough hydrochloric acid. So when you swallow these little microscopic things, they get into your bloodstream because the hydrochloric acid is not strong enough in your stomach, and they get in. So how do you cure pinworms in a little kid? Salt. You get a little kid to drink like 3/4 of a teaspoon of sea salt, or a full teaspoon of sea salt in 16 ounces of water. Have a little kid drink that. And within a day, the pinworms, they go away. They crawl out their butt, or they die. They die in your digestive tract, and they get pooped out. And so the worms are really coming from, a lot of the parasites that we get are coming because we don't have enough hydrochloric acid in the stomach. We don't have enough hydrochloric acid in the stomach because we don't have enough salt. Eat more salt. It's the ideal. It's what we're designed for. And, our medical system, quite frankly, has duped us into believing a whole bunch of nonsense and hogwash that our ancients knew differently. And don't believe me, try these things, and you'll see so many things. I can't tell you how many people were having so much trouble sleeping, having insomnia. I put them on the salt. Whew, wow. The insomnia went away. The reason the insomnia was happening is because their adrenals were all whacked out. Their adrenals were messed up, and their whole circadian rhythms were off, and they didn't know if they were waking up when they were supposed to be asleep, and they're falling asleep when they're supposed to be awake, because the adrenals were not controlling. But the adrenals, the top thing, go back to one of my other videos on the adrenal health, and that's one of the top things is how do you fix your adrenals, is getting 5 hours of uninterrupted sleep and getting salt. You fix the adrenals by getting the salt. Okay, let's go over one more question. The New Zealand velvet deer antler. I've had so many people that have sent doesn't that's stem cells. You're taking in live stem cells. So we've all heard about these injectable stem cells or stem cell therapy. You eat stem cells. You can eat these stem cells. And so I've had so many people go, doesn't the stomach acids destroy that? No, they don't. The amino acids are not, they're broken apart, but there are many things that stay intact. And one of the things that stays intact is the stem cells stay intact in our digestive tract. They get broken apart, but they don't get completely, they get broken down into these little particles, and so the stem cells stay intact throughout the whole digestive tract. You swallow them, they go into your system. So people go, well, they're not your stem cells. They're coming from an animal. That's the most amazing thing about stem cells, is that they don't have to even be human stem cells. A stem cell is a stem cell is a stem cell, which is, it's like, a white sheet of paper in your printer, okay? It can be a picture, it can be an email, doesn't matter. The print head is printing what's on it, but it starts off as a blank sheet of paper. And so that's what's happening. That's what a stem cell is that it doesn't matter if it comes from another being or it comes from a plant. There are actually stem cells that we get from plants. These things your body takes and says, oh, goody, I can use that, and I'll take it. And the most amazing thing about the stem cells, so whether we swallow them or we inject them. So let's say about the injectable stem cells, where people are having stem cell therapy treatment for, let's say, a broken hip. What they do is they harvest the stem cells. So sometimes they use embryonic stem cells, sometimes they use adult stem cells, sometimes they use your own stem cells. Well, they'll take, some of your tissue out of your body, take some of your blood, spin it in the back room and bring it back and inject it into your body. So what the stem cells do is, since they're a blank sheet, they don't have any information imprinted on them. What they do is wherever it goes to, let's say they inject it into the jaw, they'll inject it into there, and since it's a blank sheet, it doesn't have any mutations. So tissue that's degrading and breaking down, it's because it's become mutated. It's lost its original information. Stem cells have no information, and they don't even have the information about what they are to be. So what happens is you inject them into that certain area of the body, and what happens is they're kind of like your teenager who goes and hangs out with the cool kids, which is, what are you doing? Oh, you're standing like this? I'll stand like this. And you're listening to this? Oh, I'll listen. Oh, you move your head like this? Yeah, right? They start copying. And what happens is, because it's what's called resonance, and so the cells resonate at the frequency of the other cells that are around them, but they don't resonate at the mutated resonance. They resonate at the original resonance, meaning it starts to rebuild the neighborhood. Because, hey, what are you guys doing? Oh, I'll do that too, but I didn't get damaged and abused like you did, so I know nothing about this abuse. I just know about the original copy, and that's why stem cells take hold and can become anything that they get injected to, or anything that they get swallowed to. You swallow them, and then they get delivered through their system, and your body is so amazing that it takes the stem cells and says, oh, great, I just needed, let me print up whatever I want to print. I just need blank sheets of paper. That's what the stem cells are. And so whatever the information is about what's around it or what's needed, it gets delivered, and it delivers these stem cells, and wherever they go to, they will then resonate and then boom, and then morph into turning into a bone cell, which is like an osteoclast or an osteoblast, or turn into a skin cell, or turn into an eye cell, or turn into any of these cells. My eye was itchy. Stem cells they're intelligent in themselves, but the intelligence comes from, they learn what's going on in the body, and they copy it, and then they start becoming, and then they will become that cell. So it's not that far out to say, oh, if I swallow these things. We've been doing it our whole life. That's what food is broccoli has stem cells. Your meat has stem cells. These things come into your body, and your body then takes it and utilizes it, and you build your body off of what's swallowed. The reason that we use the New Zealand velvet deer antler is because it's very pure. It's pure stem cells, and it's very unadulterated, and it's very prolific. Because if you've ever seen an antler, so these come from reindeer in New Zealand. They have herds and herds of these reindeer. And why New Zealand? Because New Zealand lamb is very, very healthy. It's some of the healthiest, it's better than American lamb. Why? Because if you see where New Zealand is, it's very, very south in the southern hemisphere. The water that's around it is very, very clean. It's away from the toxic trade winds. And so all of the air that comes to New Zealand is very, very clean. There's air that comes over to America that sweeps over from the Sahara, that sweeps over from Africa, because of the trade winds, and stuff is very toxic. Or conversely, there's stuff that comes from America that goes over to other parts of the world. And so these animals are eating what they eat. So these particles land on the grass that they're eating. And so a lot of American lamb is very toxic, first of all, because of all the toxins that are landing on the little blades of grass that they're eating, the water that they're drinking, again, the air that they're breathing, it's very toxic. We are too, okay? But if we eat things that come from very healthy regions, not only is it very clean, it also re-educates our body about how to be clean. So the New Zealand velvet deer antlers is what Premier Research Labs uses because a lot of the velvet deer antler that comes from other places is very toxic. It's not as clean as New Zealand. You pretty much can't get any cleaner than New Zealand, other than like the Antarctic. And New Zealand's pretty close to the Antarctic. It's very, very clean. Now, again, if you ever seen an antler, these things grow like every year. The antlers grow and they get huge. You ever seen like a fully grown reindeer or fully grown elk? They're huge. They're massive. They only grow once a year and then they fall off. And they fall off and then they start off these little nubs, these little velvet covered nubs, and then they grow. Well, what's growing is actually the velvet that surrounds it. It's full of these blood cells. It's velvet. It feels velvety, but it's full of all these blood cells. And what these blood cells do is it brings all of these osteo chondrite blasts and things like that. It's building stalactites, it's building calcium, and it's depositing it, and it brings it in and deposit, and so it grows like a matrix. And it grows. You can watch them grow. They grow so fast. Like you come out the next day, like, where'd that new one come from? They just grow very, very fast. And the reason is because those cells are programmed to do that. So the New Zealand velvet deer antler, the stem cells that come from them, they're programmed to grow very prolifically, extremely fast. So if we take them in our body, wherever they get delivered to, they're going to grow very, very fast because they're programmed to do that. Okay? So, all right, and it's getting to like 45 minutes, and it looks like I had 3 people that were watching, which is great. I didn't get any comments. I didn't get any, and maybe I don't know how to use it correctly. So next time I'll do this, I'll see if I can work some of the bugs out, and we'll do it better next time. Okay? Till next time, bye-bye.